Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to Tbsp Brewing. Today, we're gonna mess around with some yeast and make it angry in order to create an awesome beer. And what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about a Hefeweizen. And not only just any Hefeweizen, a Hefeweizen from the oldest brewery in the world, Weihenstephan Brewery in Freising, Germany. We'll get into the yeast and why we're gonna piss it off a little bit in a minute. However, I really wanted to talk about Weihenstephan Brewery in general. We had a chance to visit this place in the fall of 2024, and it was absolutely amazing. I didn't get a chance to have their Hefeweizen there. They had different fest beers on because it was around the time of Oktoberfest. So we tried a bunch of awesome other beers. But this is one of their kind of staple beers and what a lot of people consider to be the Hefeweizen beer. We're gonna go through the entire brew day today and my version of this clone after we share a beer together. I'm gonna show you how you really should pour a Hefeweizen. Some people may say, well, you just crack the lid and just dump her right in, right? Wrong. There's an actual way of pouring this half-liter bottle into this Hefeweizen glass. First, you wanna make sure the glass is not dry. So we've rinsed this out, we'll pour out any excess water, and then we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna crack our Hefeweizen. Next, we're gonna take our glass and we're gonna tip it almost completely sideways. So we're gonna go ahead, start pouring it in. And then once we start getting it down to about where the bottle would reach the beer, we tip it over and we dump it in. And we slowly start bringing up the neck of the bottle. To get some of that nice head. And then we pull it out right about there. Now we take our bottle and we actually roll it on the table. And the reason is because this is gonna kind of release some of those yeasts that are stuck on the bottom of the bottle. And then we're gonna pour it in. And that's how you get a perfect Hefeweizen pour. Prost. And now that you know how to pour one, let's drink one and then let's brew one. Ooh, man, just the aroma alone is gonna give you that ripe banana flavor, banana clove flavor. Different than you would see in an American wheat beer. This has that banana clove flavor. The American version of this does not. That's more of that kind of bready, hop forward type of beer. This is gonna be that traditional Hefe or Weiss beer because it's gonna use that yeast strain that's gonna give those banana clove flavors. And we're gonna talk a little bit about that once we get to the yeast portion and what you can do to really bring out those ripe banana flavors like we're smelling in this one here. And it's a great color. Obviously a wheat beer, so it should be hazier looking, right? And it should have that kind of foamy cap on there. But let's go in for the taste and see if it tastes just like it smells. And the taste of this beer is really kind of unreal. I'm not a huge clove fan. It's a little more subtle in this beer than in other similar Weiss beers. I like a little bit more banana forward, and we're gonna tell you a little bit some tips and tricks in the brew day process that can make it a little bit more banana forward. And huge shout out to Clawhammer Supply, who is a sponsor of this video. We're gonna be using their all grain 240 volt brew in a bag system in order to brew this particular beer. There's also links for Clawhammer Supply where you can get their brewing systems, and they even make all grain recipe kits that you can check out on their page. Links in the video description below. I'm gonna have the whole entire recipe along with the entire directions in the video and in the video description below. So stay tuned and we're gonna go through it. All right, let's talk about this recipe, which is actually super, super simple. It's literally 4 things, besides water, of course, which we'll get to in a minute because there's some things you may or may not want to adjust in your water for this one. But the 4 other ingredients are 2 types of grains, German wheat and German Pilsner. And you should be erring on the side of 55 to 60% or so wheat. And that's what's gonna give it that hazy appearance. I like to get close to 60%. I don't usually go over that for a Hefeweizen. So in this case, I have 6 pounds of German pale wheat and 4.5 pounds of German Pilsner. When you're putting together this recipe, you'll also notice that the pH is gonna be a little high. And normally I would add some acidulated malt, But in this case, we're gonna talk about why we're not gonna really worry about a little bit higher than normal pH. For hops, we're using all Hallertau Mittelfruh. We're gonna use those for both bittering hops and a 10-minute addition towards the end to give it just a little bit of hop characteristic and aroma at the end. But the real reason that this is gonna come out really banana and somewhat clove is the fact that we're using the appropriate yeast that Weihenstephan uses in their brewery, which is WLP 300, the Hefeweizen ale yeast from White Labs. This yeast in a couple of other strains are the exact strain that they use at their brewery. Now let's talk a little bit about some abnormalities that you might run into that are different than your traditional brew days that you're gonna hear me saying, really watch out for your pH. Really try to make a yeast starter when possible, things like that. And for this recipe, we're gonna kind of throw that out the window and talk a little bit about this style in particular and why we kind of wanna piss off the yeast. And the short answer is because we want some of those off flavors, if you will, because in this style, they're actually the good off flavors that we want, like those extra bananas and clove flavors depending on fermentation temperature. But you don't want to get too crazy and way under pitch this. For a 5.5 gallon, I'm going to pitch this whole thing, but I'm not going to make a starter to kind of give it a little head start. I want it to be stressed out a little bit so when it gets in there, it starts giving some of those desirable flavors. Also, for fermentation temperature, this one wants to be somewhere between 68 and 72 degrees, which is a little bit warmer than your normal ale, but not by much. The warmer that you go with this yeast, the more banana flavors, those ripe banana flavors you're gonna get. The cooler you go with it, the more clove flavors that you're gonna get with it. And so I kind of want to err on that higher side of the recommended temperature range. So I'm going to shoot between 70, 72 temperature range. Once you put this recipe into an app, say like Brewer's Friend or like I use, you're going to notice that the pH is way up there. In my case, it's almost 5.8. And normally I preach and saying, make sure you get your pH down to 5.2, 5.3. That's optimal for your mash. Well, in this case, because a wheat beer in general with a lot of wheat will have a lower pH at the end of the day when the beer is completely finished after fermentation, that pH can actually be a little bit higher. And so don't worry about adding any lactic acid or acidulated malt to lower this. Normally that's super important. For a wheat beer like a Hefeweizen, not as important. This beer in general just kind of goes against the grain of other videos, and I'm gonna tell you why water pH is super important. Speaking of water, there is a water profile you should try to aim for in this particular style, and I'll have that listed in the video description below. I'll also put it right here. This water profile is straight from Freising in Germany, which is just north of Munich. So it's a similar water report that they use at their brewery. Depending on where you live, you may not need to add very many salt additions. In my case, my water is very similar to this water profile with just some really minor adjustments. Now, your water profile is going to be specific to your starting water, no matter what that is. And watch that video in the video description below to talk about how to adjust your water if you don't know how to do that. So let's get this water heating up to 152 degrees, which is our mash temperature, and then we're gonna start double crushing our grains. And for the claw hammer system, crushing your grains a second time is really a good thing. It's gonna help with your efficiency in the claw hammer system, which has a large basket that sits in the middle of this, where you're not gonna worry about stuck sparges. If you don't have an all-in-one system like this one, I would highly recommend using rice hulls in your mash. About a half a pound or so will help you prevent a stuck sparge. All right, once this has hit our regular mash temperature, we're gonna go ahead and shut off the heat and the pump. Make sure you shut off the valve that goes down to your pump for your water, and we're gonna take off the lid and start mashing in. At this time, we're also gonna add 4 grams of ascorbic acid. If you see any of my videos, you know that I like adding this to help preserve the beer, and a wheat beer is no different, just like a hazy IPA, very susceptible to oxidation. All right, we're good and stirred in. We're gonna go ahead, reattach our lid, and get the pump and the heat back started. Make sure you go ahead and turn on that valve again so we start getting that wort recirculating through. And as you can tell, if you lift up a little bit, you can see that there is the spray action going on, which is recirculating that wort and making sure we get all the sugars and stuff off of those grains. That's a huge bonus to the claw hammer system. And now we set a timer for 60 minutes. During the last 10 minutes, we are going to be raising this thing up for a mash out to 170 degrees, but we'll see you in about 50 minutes. All right, guys, we are about an hour. We've had about 10 minutes at 170 degrees here to help us mash out. So we're gonna go ahead and stop both the pump and the heat on this thing. We're gonna go ahead and close off the valve that goes down to the pump just to make sure that when we take off this lid that nothing comes through here. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take off the lid and we're gonna raise up this basket. And to help us do that, Clawhammer also sells one of these awesome pulleys that I have attached to my roof joists. So we just simply hook on this pulley system to the basket, and then we easily can pull this thing right up. Letting our wort drain out a little bit at a time. And then Clawhammer gives you these awesome little clips that are gonna clip under the basket so we can go ahead and take the pulley off and still let it drain out. I like to let this drain for quite a while to let all of this wort actually flow out of and get all those sugars off of the grains. So we're gonna go ahead and pull this up as much as we can. Get one of these clips on the back here. You get 3 of them with the kit, but you really, with the whole system, but you really only need a couple of them that'll help kind of drain off to the side too. So I'm gonna go ahead and put 2 of these in. And then we can go ahead and just lower this basket right on those clips instead. And go ahead and take off the pulley. Then what I like to do is actually pull the grain basket and put it over a bucket on its side or at an angle in order to collect the rest of the wort as it's cooling down. You can go like this. And kind of let it drain in. You can always add that wort then back into the kettle once it gets finished. To get this heat element on, we're gonna change this to manual mode. So I'm gonna go ahead and hold the AM button, and then it's gonna change to a percentage. At first, this should be 100%. I'm gonna turn this up to 100 until it starts boiling, and then I'm gonna turn it back down to 65. So to do that, go ahead and push set, and then we're gonna go ahead and turn that down, or turn that up rather, to 100%, and then push set. Then we're gonna go ahead and turn the heat, or turn the heat on, right? And then that's gonna heat this thing up to a boil. Before it gets up to a boil, very important to add firm cap S. This is going to prevent boil overs. This will happen even in this system, especially with the 240 volt that heats up very, very fast. So I shake that up, and then I'm gonna drop a few drops in this as it is warming up. And that's all it really takes. Give that a good stir around, and that will help it from overflowing. Now, as it gets close to a boil and you start seeing some rumblings of a boil, you're gonna wanna turn this thing down to 65. You may not need to do this if you have the 110 volt version, but the 240 is very, very hot. All right, so I'm starting to see a little bit of rolling going on, not too much, but I wanna get ahead of it. So we're gonna go ahead and turn this down by pushing set. Going down to 65 degrees, or 65% rather, and then pushing set again. So what manual mode is really gonna do is gonna only give about 65% of the energy to the heating element. And so it is going to be, instead of rapidly boiling, it will eventually kick on and then kick off, kick on and kick off in order to keep this at a nice rolling boil. Again, if it's too high or too low, you can adjust that. It can be 60, it can be 67, you know, higher, lower as you need it. At this time, I'm also going to be adding our hop spider. This comes with the Clawhammer system, which is excellent for adding hops. So we're going to go ahead and do that so that gets nice and warmed up. All right, as you can tell, we're starting to get at a rapid boil here. So I'm going to go ahead and add our hops. This is 1 ounce of Hallertau Mittelfruh. All right, we are about 15 minutes left, which means we are adding our second round of Hallertau Mittelfruh. 10 minutes left, we're gonna go ahead and add our yeast nutrient in there, about 1 tablespoon. All right, guys, we are almost done. We've got about 30 seconds left. I've already just turned on the water in my plate chiller, so we're ready to go. We're gonna go ahead and get this thing shut off. In this case, it's fairly easy. We're just gonna go ahead and shut off the heat here. That turns everything off. To get this thing cooled down, we're gonna start recirculating first in our kettle like we talked about before. So I'm gonna take my hose that's leading from my plate chiller, and I'm gonna hook it to the edge of the kettle here. And then I'm gonna open up the valve that leads from the kettle, and we're gonna hit the pump button here. And out of the fermenter, it's showing under 100 degrees already. So as this cools down and it gets down into the 80s or so, I'm gonna start transferring directly into a sanitized fermenter. All right, now that this is cooled down enough, I'm gonna go ahead and shut the pump off. We can start moving this directly into our fermenter. So we're gonna take our hose, put it down here. I like to do it through a screen to help it aerate the wort a little bit, and we're gonna turn the pump back on. This will also catch any particles or grain or hops or anything else that you accidentally got into the kettle. All right, we have our worts right here. We are almost exactly right at the 5.5 gallon mark, which is awesome. We do have a little bit of loss in the hoses and stuff, which if you wanted to, you could take out. I'm okay leaving a little bit in there. It's not that much. It might be a pint or so once you empty all the hoses and stuff out, but you could do that if you wanted to. I'm gonna go ahead and take a hydrometer reading with a sanitized medicine dropper for my refractometer. And then I'm gonna drop in my sanitized tilt hydrometer so we can start getting some readings on that. Then I'm gonna put my airlock and stuff on, and I'm gonna make sure that we're at the right temperature before we go ahead and pitch our yeast. All right, well, the hard part's over. We got a beer, it's now got some yeast, and we're fermenting away. We're gonna let it do its thing, and we'll come back to see how it turned out. All right, guys, we are back, and our Hefeweizen is all done. It is transferred into a keg, it's carved up, and ready to pour us a cold one. So let's see how we did. All right, I present the Hefeweizen. This is a great looking beer. It is that wheat light color where it has that haze from the wheat. One thing that I wanted to do was actually test this side by side next to Weihenstephaner's Hefe, which has that kind of classic German taste with the banana forward, ripe banana forward flavor. I'm not trying to say this is a clone beer by any way, but I'd like to be kind of close to, one of the oldest breweries in the world that makes a fantastic Hefe. So without further ado, let me go grab one of those and we'll compare. All right, so I know I don't have the proper glass this time. However, I'm gonna go ahead and pour this in a regular pint glass just so we can compare side by side and there won't be any differences in color and all that kind of stuff, just to see what the differences are. All right, so right off the bat, you can tell there are some color differences. The Weihenstephaner is a little darker than mine is. We're not trying to mimic this. This wasn't a clone recipe by any means. They have about the same type of cloudiness, I would say. Maybe mine's even a little bit more hazy, but this one's been in a bottle longer, so that's fair. They could have just used some kind of darker pale malt that they use, but both were made with German ingredients, and so the real question is, how do they taste side by side? So let's go ahead and do the smell test. Right away, you get that ripe banana smell. Not so much of the clove, but definitely those banana smells. And very, very similar with this one. Very ripe banana in both of them. Maybe a smidge more aromatic in the real one than mine. Again, not a clone, but both Hefes. So we'll just go in for the flavor. One thing that's distinctly different, by the way, pouring these things is that Weihenstephan has yeast in their bottles. And in this, I kegged this one. So all of the yeast essentially floats to the bottom and then ultimately gets poured out in your first pint or two. So you're not going to get that yeast flavors and things in the beer right away. So this one, light, nice, refreshing, got that nice kind of medium body that you're looking for. And then you do have those nice ripe banana flavors with the background of a little bit of clove. So that's nice. This one is mine, and we'll see how this one compares. I think mine is a little touch sweeter than this one is. It still has about the same kind of mouthfeel body wise, even though it is lighter, and you don't have as many of kind of those kind of caramelly notes, if you will, but still got that banana forward with a light amount of clove flavors in the background. So I'm extremely happy with how this one turned out. You know, now I'm doing them in reverse order. It's harder to tell the sweetness, but this one is a little bit more banana forward still than this one. And I think it has to do with those yeasts being still in the bottles versus mine. But I still think they both have a really good ripe banana forward flavor. I think it's a really, really good beer. And although they are different, I don't know that the difference in color really comes across taste wise all that much in the beer. All in all, I'm really happy with how this beer turned out. I haven't made, admittedly, a Hefeweizen in quite some time, and although I see them sometimes at breweries or when people brew them at my homebrew club, they tend to be a little bit more balanced between the banana and the clove. And so in this case, I like a little bit more of a banana forward beer, and this was perfect. This one had that based on our fermentation temperatures being a little higher. It also helped the yeast that we were using was that WLP 300 Hefeweizen Ale from White Labs. This one turned out fantastic. It is definitely one you should brew if you are a Hefeweizen fan, or if you're not and you want to brew it anyway because it's a fantastic beer to impress your friends. Either way, go brew this thing. As usual, all this stuff will be down in the video description below. You don't need to write down anything. The full recipe, everything will be right there. Consider hitting that like and subscribe button and join button if you want to become a member and be totally awesome. You get some brew day sheets, you get my videos early as they drop, and you get some exclusive recipes for members only, who are all awesome along with you. So thanks everybody, cheers, and happy brewing. Hey, thanks for watching my video. You're awesome. You want to be even more awesome? Hit that join button and become a member. You'll get exclusive members-only recipes and other perks like brew day sheets, and watch my videos early as they drop before anyone else. So hit that join button below, become a member, and be awesome.